I'm thankful for those that are volunteering and helping and work with our children's ministry. I appreciate all that they do and the time they take out of their own schedules and lives to invest into the next generation. If you have your Bibles, go ahead and turn with me. We're going to be in Genesis chapter 37 is where we're going to start. And we're in a new series today. We finished up All That Was of Christmas and all the decorations are down. And don't you feel just a little bit sad when all the decorations go down? I know I do. It doesn't look near as pretty. You know, it's beautiful always during Christmas season. And it's still pretty. It's just not quite as pretty. But still, we're in a new series. We're in a new time of life. And I know God has something for us this morning to set us in motion for 2018. Our title of our series is Joseph, A Life of Perseverance. We're going to look at how Joseph, he persevered in every aspect, in every way, in this journey that he did. And we're going to start at Genesis 37, which is the beginning of his story, really. The beginning of where he's going to take us and what he's going to do. But we have a main passage that I want to read for us. And it's James 1:12. And this is the main passage for the whole series. It's what we're going to keep going back to week in and week out as we go through this. But it is this, James 1:12. It says, "Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love Him." I want us to remember that text. I want us to come back to it and focus on it as we continue throughout this study. There's something to be said of perseverance. There's an old story out there that I know many of you have probably heard. It was a farmer and he had a donkey, and the donkey got stuck in a well. It fell down in it. And the farmer tried everything he could think of to get this donkey out. He couldn't figure out what he was going to do, but he tried everything. And he couldn't get it to happen. So finally he decided, okay, I just got to fill in the well. And I'm just going to have to cover up the donkey, and I'm going to have to do this for him and put him out of his misery because I just don't know what else to do. So he starts filling the well up with dirt. And the shovel in, the shovel out, they keep shoveling dirt. And the donkey, instead of giving up life, right? Instead of giving up hope, every time dirt gets shoveled in, he takes a step up. Every time dirt gets shoveled in, he takes a step up. Till finally, the donkey makes his way out. And he gets out, and he just kind of does one of those snorts that, horses and animals do, and just takes off on his own. And the farmer sat there and looked at himself and thought, well, that was pretty smart of me, wasn't it? Perseverance in life can be like this. And life is not always easy, right? Life can be difficult. Life can be trying. Life can be tough. But if we persevere through it, we can make it through anything. And we'll be stronger on the other side once we make it through. The Christian life is not made in a moment. The Christian life is lived in a lifetime. Salvation is given in a moment. I don't want us to misunderstand. Salvation is given in a moment. But at the same time, the Christian life is lived in a lifetime. The Christian life is matured in a lifetime. This is what we're going to talk about this study, is how do we persevere and grow in maturity in that Christian life through trials, temptations, and even sometimes tests that God brings our way. And so we're going to look at this today. At that passage that we just read in James chapter 1, it talks about the crown of life. Now this crown, of course, it's eternal life, right? We have this great, wonderful victory of eternal life that is there. Those who persevere and stay true to God were promised a victorious crown, a victor's crown, that crown of victory. Today we're going to begin one of the most remarkable stories of the Bible, one of the most remarkable journeys of the Bible, and that's the life of Joseph, son of Jacob. I'm excited to see where this takes us. I have a quote that I want to read to you guys from Boyce, and it says this of Joseph. Many of you know who he is. He had the coat of many colors, right? He ended up having to go to Egypt and all these kind of things. But of this life, the man that you guys can think of as Joseph, Boyce says this: he was loved and he was hated. He was favored and abused, tempted and trusted, exalted and abased. Yet at no point in the 110-year life of Joseph did he ever seem to get his eyes off of God or cease to trust Him. Adversity did not harden his character. Prosperity did not ruin him. He was the same in private as in public. He was truly a great man. And I hope that we see that as we come through this, that he was a man that trusted in God, gave everything to God, and trusted completely in what God was going to do, regardless of where he was at in his current situation in life. But also as we go through this, I want us to remember, he was still a man. He was still human as we're human. And so he still made mistakes. He still stumbled. And we're going to bring some of those out even today, of the mistakes that he made. He had a lot of struggles in life. Some were out of his control, and some of them were caused even by some of the things that he had done. And so we're going to look at these. Let's start reading at verse 1 of Genesis 37, and it says this. Jacob lived in the land where his father had stayed, the land of Canaan. This is the account of Jacob's family line. Joseph, a young man of 17, was tending the flocks with his brothers, the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and he brought their father a bad report about them. Now here's the very beginning. We're going to pause right there. Here's the very beginning of this wonderful story that we're going to read. And the beginning of this story kind of starts out a little bit shady. It doesn't start out as great as we would hope. It has a little bit of controversy. And verse 3 tells us a little bit more of what that controversy is. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons because he had been born to him in his old age. And he made an ornate robe for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. We're going to pause right there and kind of label these first 3 verses. And we're going to label these the favoritism of Jacob. The favoritism of Jacob. This is the father's favoritism. Joseph had a lot of struggles in his life. And some of them came not really because of his own fault. Some of them came actually because of the fault of his father. That his father had done, things that his father had put into motion. These chapters that we're getting ready to read, they stand out for a couple different reasons, but one of which is Jacob and the way he treats his sons, the way he treats Joseph and the rest. Looking at this, we obviously get to see that there is that idea of favoritism. Joseph here is being singled out, has kind of been set apart. He's been given this wonderful robe because the father loved him because he had him in his old age. But that love shadowed more than just the coat. It would have been actions, words, and most of Joseph's life would have been this favoritism. So then also, since Joseph has been born, most of the other sons' lives would have been this favoritism. And that had caused some things to happen within the family unit. We get to see that Joseph was sort of the pampered favorite of Jacob. He's sort of that pampered child. Here, he gives him this coat of many colors that we all remember from those wonderful childhood stories that we get to see in the coat that they give. But that coat is much more than just a simple gift, but it's really a display to Joseph and to all his brothers that his father was showing favoritism so much more than just the love, but even almost so showing favoritism that anything he had was his. He wanted to set him apart, and he wanted to give him the best. When we look at this coat and we see it, many believe that this was the idea of a tunic. It wasn't just a small coat. It wasn't just something that was short-sleeved or anything, but it would have went to the wrists, it would have went to the ankles, as opposed to the shorter one. And so many believe that this coat would have been one that was not a working man's coat. This would have been someone that would have been of prestige, that would have been of honor. And so as Joseph is giving him this, he's really laying that idea of honor and prestige upon Joseph, but not really upon any of his other sons. And so naturally, that would have caused his other sons to become bitter. That would have caused his other sons to be a little bit jealous, to be a little bit angry of the love and affection that a father is showing one son in particular. Because of these things, we get to see from the text that Joseph's brothers hated him. Not just that they disliked him. Not just that, they were annoyed by him, but they hated him. That's a big word. And then so much so it says that they hated him, they could not even speak peaceably to him. They couldn't have one nice conversation. Not one good thing could be said in their time together. This is the lifestyle that Jacob bred into his family unit. You have to give that to him. This isn't because of Joseph, and this isn't because of his brothers. This is directly because of the father, right here. And so this shows us as parents, we have a big obligation within our children to lay a good foundation so that they have the right future ahead of them. Joseph had a big obstacle to overcome. Jacob's favoritism of Joseph, it was obvious, was a huge source of conflict here. And the brothers, they hated Joseph for it. The good thing about this is that God can overcome all of it, right? And we get to see what he does and how he brings unity to even this broken family unit. But that happens much, much, much later. For most of Joseph's life, his brothers hate him, detest him, cannot stand him at all. How horrible that is. As we look at these passages, I think this is a good place for us to stop and examine our own lives. examine as parents and grandparents, how are we treating our kids? How are we raising our kids? Are we doing as Jacob has done and causing dysfunction? Are we doing as Jacob has done and causing favoritism, bitterness, hatred, and strife among our children and grandchildren? Or are we raising them in a proper way? We should strive to show each child that we love them, we care for them, have the best intentions for them. Now, looking at this, we see that Jacob, he messed up. We get that. But what are some of the reasons that he messed up? What are some of the things that he done? We see there was that favoritism there. But so much more, I think it goes even deeper. Jacob had an obligation to all of his children. Whenever things were starting to get out of hand, Jacob should have done something to stop it, right? An act of discipline to show that this is not right. We don't really see that coming out of Jacob's life and his character, that act of discipline here with his kids. We want to bring that out. Our actions of discipline, they're so important because they set our children up on path for a better future. If we choose not to discipline our children now, they are going to get disciplined later, and it might not be in the way we would hope. It might be through the law or other things like that. Hebrews 12:6 tells us this: because the Lord disciplines the one he loves, and he chastises everyone he accepts as his son. So that idea of discipline is that we love our children. And so out of that love, we discipline them by love for a better future, for a better hope, for a better tomorrow. If we let our children rule the household, if we let our children run rampant, we're not doing them any favors, right? Here, Joseph is getting the result of a father who did not discipline well. But then even more so, I think this will be more apparent to all of us, is as parents, our actions, they are so important. And one action in particular that Ephesians 6 brings out is the idea not to provoke our kids to anger. Not to provoke our kids to anger. To raise them up in a proper way, and one way in which does not lead them on this path of hatred and bitterness and anger and jealousy and contentment. Joseph is a product of a father who raised his kids provoking them to anger. I'm taking 5 points on this idea of not provoking your kid to anger from a pastor of Grace Fellowship Church in Toronto, Canada. And I want to bring these out. And the first one, he says, ways that we sometimes as parents, maybe inadvertently, we provoke our kids to anger. One of the things he says is that we strive to produce goodness instead of holiness. And what he means by that is the idea that we're very concerned with the outward appearance and the outward way that our children act and behave. We want to make sure that they talk the way they're supposed to talk. They better be respectful, right? We want to make sure that they do what we ask them to do, whether it's chores or anything like that. But the outward appearance is very important. But if all we ever focus on is the outward appearance, as Wednesday night we talked about the idea that I trained my dog Chester how not to pee and poop in the house. I potty trained him by rubbing his nose in it, whipping him, and throwing him outside. Well, if he would do any of those things, if he pee or poop in the house, he immediately would hunker down, cower, and be scared because he knew he was in trouble. But he didn't know what he did was wrong. He just knew that he was going to get punished for it. If we teach our children the idea that outwardly you need to be this way, are we truly showing them the idea of holiness, that inwardly we're not changed? That inwardly we need to change. It's not about the outward appearance so much as the inward structure of our lives. Our children need to see that sin has consequences. Our children need to see that we're a product of sin. And our children need to see that we act out because of sin. There's a better way to change the sin. Not to change the outward behavior where sin is still present, but we change the sin. We get rid of that, and that only happens through Jesus Christ, through salvation. We need to produce within our children a desire and a heart to love God. Because if we're loving God, we're going to love Him by obeying Him, right? A heart and desire to love God. First and foremost, it's not about goodness. It's about holiness. Desire for our kids to love God. And out of that love, they will be good. Out of that love, they will be good. The next step is the idea of hypocrisy instead of authenticity. And this is one that maybe sometimes we don't really think we're doing it. But sometimes we might tell our kids to do something, and then we turn right around and we do the opposite, right? When we do those things, automatically within our children's hearts and within our children's minds, they're saying, why? Why is it okay for you to do that and not me? Why is it okay for you to go there and not me? Sometimes think of this in the way, There are lots of different things out there in our culture today, from movies, from TV shows, from music and stuff like that. And sometimes as little children, we're very eager to not let them watch a certain thing, to not let them listen to a certain thing. We want to keep them sheltered from it. But then, whenever they are not there, what do? We watch those certain things. We listen to those certain things. What's the difference? If they're too young for it, if they're too immature for it, then why are we saying we're so much more mature? Why are we saying we're so much better? Why are we saying we're there? If it's not good enough for them, is it truly good enough for us? And I'm going to be honest with you. I fail on that sometimes. Because it's hard sometimes, whenever you look at everything that's out there, it's hard sometimes not to be that way. But this is one thing that's huge, I think, within our lives and within our culture, that we should treat our children the same way we expect to be treated. And if we're going to tell them not to do something, we better not go do it either. Because they're going to grow up thinking, well, what's the point of that? What is that? And the same way that we are within our church walls should be the same way we are at home. Because our kids are going to see that and understand it. I finally got around to watching a movie the other day. May has been on me since we went to the Mexico trip to watch The Shack. I'm not going to get into the theology of that. If you guys want to, we can. But I watched the movie, and one thing that came out about that movie was the idea that this little boy, he grew up in church. He was raised in, his father was an elder in church, but every time when his father would come home and something bad would happen, his father would drink. And his father would drink a little too much. And his father would beat on his mother. And his father would in turn beat on him. And this little boy grew up with the idea that church really doesn't do anything. Church doesn't really produce character. Church really doesn't change you. His view of God was twisted, was skewed because of the way his father raised him. Now we can take that, that's an extreme measure, but the same can be true with how we treat our kids. The way we raise them is important. And it's important to not be hypocritical. It's important to treat them the same way that we would treat anyone else, and to be the same here as we are at home. We've got to be real. And the next one is anger instead of patience. And this is the idea of correction. We need to correct our children in the right ways, to not just be rash and hasty, but to have patience with them because they're young, because they will make mistakes, because they are trying to learn. They're at that age they're going to learn. We have to be patient with them in the same sense that even the Word of God tells us to be patient with new believers. Because new believers are going to make mistakes, right? Because they're young in the faith. We are to be patient with them and to bring them up, not to discourage them and to push them away. The same way is true with how we raise our children. Be patient with them and bring them up, knowing they're going to make mistakes and correcting them correctly. And then the next one is aloofness instead of involvement. The idea that we're not just involved with our children in moments of discipline, in moments of catastrophe and hardship, but that we truly are caring and concerned with who they are on a daily basis. We want to build up that relationship. One of the things that I learned most when I went to the D6 conferences, it came from a guy who was a children's pastor in Kentucky. And the way he raised his kids, and this is something I hope that I can do and would just like to strive for it, but the way he raised his kids is he built the relationship, he said, out of a friendship love, knowing that I am the boss, knowing that I am the dad, but I'm still there. I'm still there for them. I'm friends with them. I'm going to play with them. I'm going to encourage them. I'm going to be there. And trying to then push them through knowing their likes and their dislikes, through knowing what they kind of are into, try to push them into the godly calling that I feel they should have, that I feel that God is leading in their lives. I think as parents, we need to be pushing our kids towards godly callings, pushing our kids towards the things that God has for them, trying to open up their eyes and see that. And that only happens if we're involved in their lives. We have to be involved within their lives. How easy it can be to get involved with our own interests, with our own work, with everything that we have, and let our children suffer. We need to stay involved within them. And then the last one is this, is pride instead of humility. I told you guys a story the other day that we went to Hastings for our first baby checkup appointment for our new addition to our family. And while we were there, Emma and Abby, we all went out on the playground and we started to play. And they had this little, kind of like a trampoline type thing, but it's up off the ground about 5 foot. And Emma was jumping on it, and I went to put my leg up there and started to move it, right? And when I did that, Emma fell off and she hit her back. And you guys remember what she did? Yes. She turned around and I had this mean, I've never seen it before, it scared me. And she tried to kick me. And I thought, where'd this come from? And then she turned around and grabbed a fist and she tried to punch me. And I was really thinking, man, somebody has got a hold of my kid. But I ended up whipping her, I told you that. What I didn't tell you is it was my fault, right? It was my fault. I'm the one that pushed the thing. I'm the one that messed her up. But she got angry. I whipped her because she got angry. I didn't whip her because of what all happened. I whipped her because she got angry and tried to kick me. But then I had to bend down and tell her I'm sorry for pushing that thing. We went to the playground this last time, at the same place, and Emma goes right back to that same little trampoline, and she says, Dad, will you not push me this time? I said, no, not at all. I just backed away. But that idea of pride, as parents, we're going to make mistakes. We're going to mess up. It's going to happen. And we're going to mess up with our kids. We're going to make mistakes with them. This idea of pride is being willing to apologize even to our children when we mess up. And that's going to go huge within their lives of knowing that, hey, we're not always perfect. We will mess up. We will make mistakes. I believe Jacob, looking at how he treated Joseph and the rest of his sons, he provoked his children to anger, which in turn is going to make life miserable for all of his sons. Not just for Joseph, but it makes life miserable for all of his sons. We want to not do what Joseph did. We want to be better than this. We want to treat our children the way that we would like to be treated. Let's go on to verse 5. The first section is really the favoritism of Joseph. Now we move on, or of Jacob. Now we move on to Joseph in verse 5. It says, Joseph had a dream. And when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. He said to them, listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field, when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it. His brothers said to him, do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us? And they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he had said. We're going to label this right here. We're going to call this Joseph's lack of concern. And I'm going to get to kind of what I mean by that, but Joseph's lack of concern. What we have here, Joseph had a dream. And he ends up telling his dream to his brothers. And his brothers already hate him. They already despise him. They can't say anything good to him. And this made them hate him more. It even set that on fire even more, that hatred. It's just stewing and burning and going. You can only imagine it's going to hit a point that it just pops and explodes. And we get to that next week. But we call this Joseph's lack of concern because right here I believe that Joseph's character is needing to be built. I want us to remember this time and day in his life, Joseph is 17 years old. Right? I want you to remember back when you were 17 years old. We didn't always make the right decision, right? We messed up sometimes. We spoke out of turn sometimes. We might not have truly cared for other people, maybe the way that you care for people today. Joseph right here, his character is still needing to be built. He's still a young man. And he's growing, just like all of us grow. And God is having to use certain situations in Joseph's life to teach him, train him, and mold him, just like he does all of us. Right here, his character is needing to be built. I think this shows the immaturity of Joseph in his youth right here. And here's what I mean by that. Joseph had a dream. All of us have dreams, right? We have crazy dreams, weird dreams. My wife dreams some of the most weird dreams I ever thought of. I can't even remember. Half the time I'll wake up and she'll say, did you have a dream? I don't think so. I have a hard time remembering most of the time. But here Joseph had a dream. His mistake was he told it to his brothers. You have to ask yourself why. Why? Why would he tell it to his brothers? Nowhere do we know or do we have any privilege of knowing that God told Joseph to tell his brothers these things. But Joseph had a dream and he decided that he wanted to go tell his brothers. And out of doing so, they hated him all the more. At best, I think Joseph here showed a great lack of tact. At best, surely he had to know that his brothers hated him because they couldn't say a nice word to him. He had to know these things. He had to know that this would set them on fire even more. They even understood what his dream meant. His brothers understood. His brothers told it back to him. Are you going to rule over us? Are we going to bow down to you? Is that really what's going to happen? You're the youngest son and we are the older brother. We're going to bow down to you? I don't think so, is what's going on in their mind. But looking at this, I think we have to see that Joseph, he was really more involved, I think, with what the dream meant for him, with what the dream happened for him, with just being excited maybe about what happened there for him, and not really concerned about maybe what his brothers might have thought. And then we're going to go on to what happens in the next time. But one other thing to bring out about this is that this dream involved sheaves. It involved food. And ultimately, Joseph's position over his brothers and his family would be connected with food. And we'll get to that later. But we get to see that this isn't everything. Joseph had another dream. And we can see what happens there. So let's go to verse 9. Then he had another dream, and he told it to his brothers. Listen, he said, I had another dream, and this time the sun and the moon and the 11 stars were bowing down to me. When he told his father as well as his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, what is this dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you? His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. Here we're going to label this Joseph's pride. So we have Joseph's lack of concern, and we have Joseph's pride. And what I mean by that is Joseph is really kind of getting consumed with the dream, with the meaning of what it means. He's getting kind of consumed with that idea, and he's not thinking of anybody else. He's thinking of his dream, of his position, of what he's going to do. And that's where he stays. He dreamed this other dream. He told it to his brothers, but then he goes, makes an even unwise move, and he tells it to his mother and his father. And here we get to see Jacob, who loves his son. Remember that. He loves his son so much. And Jacob rebukes Joseph and says, are you serious? You're going to rule over all of us as well? This is really going to happen? And see, at this point, Joseph, he is really in contrast with Jesus. A lot of Joseph's life, and we're going to get into this as we keep moving, a lot of Joseph's life is really a parallel to Jesus and when Jesus came and what he did. And we can see a lot of things that are similar and how it foreshadows Jesus' life. Here, Joseph is directly in contrast to who Jesus is and what Jesus has done. At this point, Joseph here, he's concerned and really self-centered with what he's doing. Jesus was always other-centered. He always was other-centered, caring about others. He came to serve and not to be served. That's who he was and that's what he did. Joseph here is needing to learn these things. He's needing to learn humility. Because right now pride is welling up. He's needing to learn humility and things like this. I want you to think of this. Though Joseph, I believe, was wrong to tell these dreams, that doesn't mean these dreams didn't come true, right? That doesn't mean there wasn't truth to them. There was. And this is what was going to happen. This is what was going to take place. What it really is, did God intend for Joseph to publish these things? Did he intend for Joseph to let these things out and to let this roll? Or is Joseph speaking really kind of out of turn here in these moments? Joseph, I believe, showed a lack of wisdom here. And perhaps it might have been rooted in pride of what this dream meant, of the position that he had, and what he was going to be doing. Before, Jacob was a big cause of Joseph's problems. Jacob was a big cause. And having the favoritism in the family unit here, Joseph becomes a bigger cause of his problems. His brothers hated him. But now Joseph is really just adding fire or fuel to that fire and just making it go more and more until ultimately it's going to have to pop. And that's what's going to take place. But this is of Joseph's unit. Now, Joseph is taking it upon himself and moving in this direction. James 3:5. And really, I want to say this. If you look at the whole book of James, you can apply that whole book to Joseph and his family right here in this passage. The whole book. But if you look at James 3:5, it says, likewise, the tongue is a small part of the body, but it makes great boast. Consider what a great forest is set on fire by a small spark. The whole book of James could be applied to Joseph and his family, but that small spark is going to really bring a lot of trouble to Joseph. It's going to really set things in motion in his life, and he's going to have to learn how to be dependent upon God. He's going to have to learn how to trust in God. And maybe even God is going to use some of these things to bring Joseph to that place of humility, to that place of seeking him, of letting him be in control. Perseverance shines really in the middle of resistance, in the middle of controversy, in the middle of trials and tests. If we don't have those things, are we really persevering? Perseverance shines when those things are happening. Joseph is getting ready to have a lot of those things come upon his life. But even right now in this little section here, we can see Joseph having controversy and things come up. And he is having to persevere. What does that look like? I want to give you three main things right here that stood in Joseph's way. Number one, I believe, is pride. Pride stood in Joseph's way right here. And he's going to have to overcome it. He's going to have to move past it. See, Joseph was set apart. He was set apart by his father He was set apart by God. He was set apart by his family, by God. He was going to rule over them. And this would be difficult to stay humble. But God is going to teach Joseph humility and what humility looks like. And we see that as we move forward in Joseph's life when we get to that. This might even be a big reason why he goes through many trials, to keep him humble. But God still uses him for great things. And the things in the dream that he got to witness, those are promises that God is going to bring forward in his life. But this pride may even be unnoticed to Joseph right now. He's 17. He's learning. He's growing. This pride might not even be noticeable to him, but it's brought out in subtle ways as mentioning these dreams to his brothers and his family, knowing the outcome it could bring. But then also, he's going to have to overcome his family. As mentioned before, his family is really messed up, right? There's a lot of stuff going on with his family right now, in particular with Joseph and his dreams. There's a lot of doubts there. There's a lot of ridicule there about Joseph and who he is, and there's a lot of rebuke. There's doubts. They're doubting his dream. There's doubting his ability to interpret his dream correctly. They're doubting that this dream will even come true, the significance of his own life. Joseph's going to have to look past all that. And he's going to have to see, hey, God has given me this. This is for a reason. And he's going to have to look past even his family and moving forward with God's plan with his life. And then further we get to see, move past the ridicule, the rebukes, and then move past even some of the hatred that will happen in his life. But I want you to think about this as Joseph, as he tells what happened to him and tells him this dream. And he doesn't really, if you notice, he doesn't really interpret the dream. He just tells them the dream. They're the ones that interpret it and then get upset. They get upset. But doesn't it frustrate you whenever you tell somebody something that you know is true? You know 100% is true. And then they look at you and say, I don't think that's right. Doesn't that frustrate you? I'm going to tell you a little story. At Christmas, we had Christmas at Mom and Dad's house, a couple Fridays ago. And Sarah and I, we were there. We were watching Touched by an Angel. You guys remember that old show, Touched by an Angel? Well, there's a guy that came on that show that looked very familiar to a guy on another show that Sarah and I have been watching called Longmire. And it just looked so familiar. And so I made the remark. But on Longmire, this guy's real old. On Touched by an Angel, of course, he's really young because that's older show. He's really young. And so I made the remark, hey, that's the same guy. And I knew it with all my heart. That's the same guy. And Sarah looked right at me. No, it's not. You're crazy. There is no way. And it really kind of got to me. I thought, you don't believe me? I'm telling you, it's the same guy. And so we had to actually go to the internet, which is a great thing. You know what? 20 years ago, if that would have happened, you'd have just had this argument for 10 years. We have the internet now. We can put a stop to it. And so we go to the internet, and we look it up. And sure enough, it's the same guy. And you know what? A little pride came in because I felt pretty good about it. But sometimes and it just frustrates you. I'm assuming that Joseph here was frustrated. Frustrated that his family would not believe the dream that is there, that has happened, that he felt and heard. He's going to have to overcome those doubts that is going on with his life. And then also, I think ultimately, this is one of the biggest things in his life right now at this age and at this stage. And all of us here, we have to overcome it because all of us here go through it. It's our immaturity. All of us here have to overcome it. We have the immaturity, one, of just this life, right? Growing up in age and things, but there's also that spiritual immaturity. We have to learn how to grow with God, how He matures us and He nurtures us and He brings us to a better place. Joseph here, one of his biggest obstacles he's going to have to overcome at this stage in his life is his immaturity. He's going to have to grow with God. We all have to grow in our faith. Joseph is no different. Hebrews 5:14 says this, but solid food is for the mature, who by constant use have trained themselves to distinguish good from evil. I believe Joseph, as we look more into his life, we see that with every circumstance and everything that comes on, he's taken more of that solid food. He's taken more of who God is. And he's following after God. He's growing, he's maturing, but it's a lifelong process to grow and to mature. None of us reach maturity overnight like that. It's a process that we grow into. Joseph is going to have to learn to grow into that and to go through it, even through trials, through mistakes, through struggles. But as we continue to look at his life, we're going to look and see how this young man, he grows in maturity. I hope as we see that, we ask ourselves, are we growing? Is our lives maturing. Not just that we're growing in age, not just that another year went around, another birthday came, but is our life spiritually growing more mature, more in the love of Christ, are we growing closer to Him? If we're not, even though that clock keeps ticking, we're really at a standstill. We need to grow every day that we're here. As we bring this to a close this morning, this is just the start of Joseph's life. This is the start of some of the struggles that he has. Yet there's a whole lot more controversy that's going to come, right? We see next week that the family is broken. Next week, brothers is filled with hatred. We get to see all of it come really to fulfillment in what they're wanting to do, and heartache comes hard next week, and we're going to bring that out. This week, though, we should ask ourselves a couple of questions here in this moment right now. Are we going through hard times? If we are we persevering? Are we doing it the right way by seeking God, asking God for guidance? Are we growing within our faith? Are we stagnant? Are we growing? I think we'll understand and know if we're growing if we're doing a few things. One, if we're praying to God and we're allowing God to talk back to us. Oh man, that's huge, isn't it? See, it's easy to pray. It's easy to throw words out. Are you taking the time to allow God to speak back to you? Are we taking that time to hear from God and to listen and say, God, what do you have in my life? Not only are we praying in this one-way conversation, we understand God wants to speak to us. Are we praying and allowing God to listen back? Are we in His Word and desiring to be in His Word? Do we desire to read it? Do we desire to know more? Are we in His Word? Do we have a hunger and love for His people? I think that's huge too. Do we have a hunger and love for His people? Do we have a hunger and love for people who are broken and hurting and lost? I think if we have some of these things, we can say that we're on a path of seeking God. If we're seeking God, God's going to meet with us. He's going to grow us. And it might be through trials. It might be through temptations. It might be through tests. But God's going to grow us. No one understands every test comes from God. God brings tests. God never brings temptation. That's all I'm saying. But God will see us through it. He'll see us through it. Whatever thing we go through, if we do it correctly, we're going to grow as we persevere and be more mature with Christ. And then as parents, are we doing all that we can to raise our kids in God? Do all that we can to show them what it means to live a godly life like the way we live. It's important that we do the right things as we raise up our kids. With every head bowed and every eye closed.